Welcome to the Artificial Intelligence and the Creative Industries lecture series. As I've told most of people already here, this is a class in the Creative Media Industries Institute for folks who are majoring either in media entrepreneurship and innovation or game design and development, but it's also open to other students as well. But the lecture series, while it is a part of the class, and they are reading the book, The Fourth Age, this is free and open to the public. So that means faculty, staff, and students at Georgia State and the industry. So the goal by the end of this class or the end of the semester, is to have 80 people in this room. So we're trying to build up the community, and that's part of the students' job. So we're all together working on that. So we really appreciate you all taking your Friday to come to hear this series. So today we have Gary Gramajo from Chic-fil-A innovation office. He's going to explain a little bit more about exactly what his innovation lab. Office was a really bad choice of words. What his lab does, but he tells data stories and analyzes data and tries to figure out the stories within that space, and believes in working with a variety of different people and a variety of different content to find innovations. I can't go much further than that because I don't know a ton about Gary because we've mostly just worked on logistics of getting him here. So I'm super excited to hear what he has to say and how artificial intelligence is helping Chic-fil-A. And so, welcome, Gary.
Thank you so much. Making sure you can hear me, Bill. Perfect. Hi guys, so thank you so much for the intro, Elizabeth, and I feel so happy to be here and share with you guys. So before we talk about me, I wanted to do like the standard Chick-fil-A trivia because it's a part of our cheesy way that we start off our presentations. So I'd just love to know, I've got two questions. So the first question is, just on average, how many lemons do you think Chick-fil-A squeezes per year? And so if I see a hand go up, I'll call on you, and the closest person, I'll just give you be our guest card. So yes.
I'm gonna go 950,000.
950,000. I'm gonna say keep going north.
Yeah.
So,
951,000.
keep going. Yes, sir.
30 million.
Keep going. Yes, sir.
Like 75 million.
Keep going.
I would say half a billion.
So we want to get there, but we're still a little bit far away. Yes, sir.
No, he took mine.
Okay.
425 million.
You're getting closer, but come down a little south. Yes, sir.
400 million.
Okay, getting close.
430 million.
No.
All right, so I'm going to take two more. I'm just going to go with the closest one. Yes, sir.
393 million.
Oh my gosh, that's super close. All right, so the young lady came the closest. So in 2017, we squeezed 309 million lemons.
Wow.
So the last Chick-fil-A trivia, how many potatoes do you think we use per year? And so it's going to be way north of even what the gentleman said in 500 million. So I'll start off. I'll do the five guesses. So yes, sir.
2.5 billion.
2.5 billion. We're not there yet, but you're in the right space.
About like 1.6 billion.
I can't even. I don't know how you got that close. So thankfully, because we have such great people that come and dine with us so frequently, we're able to hit those numbers, and we're continuing to expand. In fact, you guys may have seen in the news that as of a few weeks ago, we opened up our first international restaurant in Toronto, Canada. Right? So we are now transitioned from being a traditional Southeastern restaurant company to having a global mindset, right? So we're having to expand our thought process there. So because we are going to be talking about AI, I would love to hear from you guys. If you were in our shoes, right? We're a restaurant company. We're in about 47 states, and we lead the industry in sales per restaurant. So globally, nobody beats out McDonald's in terms of sales. But at a per restaurant level, we're double the industry average in terms of sales. So if you were in our shoes, there's no wrong answers here. I'm curious to hear from you guys. What are ways that you think a restaurant company, why would a restaurant company be interested in using artificial intelligence? Why would we care? There's no wrong answer, just curious to know. What do you guys think about that? Yes.
I think as a fast food restaurant, or more or less just a food restaurant in general, you guys are trying to optimize how you get food to the customer. You're trying to make their experience as easy as possible.
That's right, as seamless as possible. Another word, frictionless as possible. That's right. So we want to make sure that there's only so much that a person is capable of doing in a given time, and we want to be able to magnify and give tools to the talent that we have. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I would say analyze also the demographics in a faster way to see what actually products are more tenant for that location.
That's right. So if there's a region of the country that really likes spicy food, or there's a region of the country that's going to really demand a vegan, vegetarian options, we need to know that, right? Et cetera, and as well as to one day how we show up to you on the app, right? We want to make sure that we get better about knowing what you prefer. Can you pass this down to him, please? So anybody, I'll take one more person. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Well, kind of piggybacking on what he said with logistics and also what he said in like demographics, the overall analytics, it can make it more efficient. But on dealing with the volume that you all deal with, I think looking ahead into what the future analytics might provide for sales and marketing, just to pitch towards it, I think AI can look farther than humans can predict right now at the moment. It'd be interesting just to like look, just dealing with the volume that you know, that company deals with.
That's right. So just and your name is
Keon.
So what, to Keon's point, when we have to plan for what is our strategy for deploying restaurants in a marketplace, we don't just randomly pick a space and put a restaurant there. We want to know where is traffic driving. We want to understand where is new commerce coming up, right? Because we want to be where people are. We're not necessarily interested in the most economical real estate. We're really interested in real estate that would allow a restaurant to have a lot of volume, and so we have to get smart about it, right? So before, we might have been looking just to add whatever the U.S. Census Bureau would provide on demographics, but now we have to get smarter about it, and current technology is allowing that. So,
yeah, I was gonna say something about when you said you had an international, like the first international Chick-fil-A in Canada. I was gonna say, like, I'm from India, or I was born in India.
Okay.
And
what part of India?
This in Andhra Pradesh, it's the southern part of India.
Okay.
And so, like, a majority of the population that's Hindu in India doesn't eat beef or anything, but like some of them eat chicken.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, like, expanding into India would be a great move for Chick-fil-A.
So there's quite a bit of people in India, right?
Yeah.
So we would definitely love to do that. I would love that just because when I went to graduate school, a significant number of my peers were from different parts of India. And I was so lucky that when we studied together, they would invite me over to their house to eat, and they would cook. And I was like, I've been eating the wrong food all of my life. So I would love to go there just so that I could go there and try the different, authentic cuisine that's there. But yes, definitely, as we begin to go overseas, go international, we will not be able to play the same playbook, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, for example, I think something that we would continue to keep is this idea that our restaurant employees would be able to get one day, they can count on one day of the week being off, right? But it may not be meaningful. Sunday may not be meaningful in some certain parts of the country, of the world. Some certain parts of the world may prefer a Saturday off, right? So those are things that we would have to continue to think about, and we've never had to think about, right? Because we've been a traditionally southeastern U.S. company. So with that being said, I wanted to move in a little bit just to briefly talk about myself. So I very intentionally picked that picture because I was an internship. This was a picture taken when I was at an internship when I was an undergrad, and it demonstrates how clueless I felt. Not that I feel that much more knowledgeable now, but how clueless I felt. And I remember as an undergrad, I was like, man, I really like math. I really like computer programming, and I don't know what to do with it. I was like, should I pursue this? Should I pursue that? And one of the things that, I was born in Guatemala. My dad gave up his accounting white-collar job in Guatemala to bring me here when I was 2. And when me and my 3 sisters, he looked at us and he said, okay guys, I've had to give up my white-collar air conditioning job to come here and work outside and landscaping. So if I'm going to do that, you guys have first of all, you're going to college, that's not a question. And then when you go to college, you've got 2 options. You either pursue a finance career, so finance, accounting, etc., or it's in the STEM. That's it. I don't want to hear that you want to draw. I don't want to hear that you want to cook. Those things are not available options to you. Which, by the way, my dad didn't have that worldview, but I think it's super cool that you guys work with people like Elizabeth that have both an art and science combination. I think that's so powerful. My dad didn't have that worldview yet. So, went to Florida State. My undergrad was in math and computer science. I didn't know really what I was doing. I just thought it was super cool. And then while I was there, at the time and still currently, in most of the universities, the math departments and statistics departments are separated. And so a professor from the staff department who specialized in machine learning, I took one of his classes and he said, why don't you come work with me and do a graduate degree in machine learning? And so I went over with him, and while I was getting my PhD in machine learning in the statistics department, my 3rd year, I was just down writing C++ code, and I looked up and I said, dude, can I really do this? This is so cool. I'm so glad that I get the privilege of doing this. But does it fit me? There are people that it fit them, and it was the right thing for them, and it is the right thing for them. But for me, I didn't know that I wanted to do that my full-time job. And so I said, is there a way that I can make a transition and be a business person that happened to know a lot about machine learning? And that's really where Chic-fil-A came into the picture. But before I talk about that, actually, the last thing I was going to say, that would just continue to cement your idea that I'm a nerdy person, is that, essentially what I worked on while I was in graduate school was object detection, but specifically around face detection, and how to do that super fast, right? And that's it. We would give up accuracy in order to gain more speed. And so what you see on your left were just how we would present the model of a face to the system, to the learning system, so that they knew what points to look for on the face. And then to your right, when we were looking to detect an object and say in the face, we would look things for very specific edges around a person's face, etc. And those were represented as characteristics or features that we were looking for. But we couldn't keep every single feature in order to do detection because we would slow the system down. So then we had to get smart about what were the most important features that we would keep and what would be the ones that we were okay with, we could live with throwing out. And so what you guys see on your top right are the features that made it through, and the ones that slide into the horizontal line are the ones that just died that weren't as important. But anyway, enough of that. The most important things in my life is right before I was going into graduate school, I met my wife, Erica. She is a traditional Southern girl, and I'm the guy from Miami that met her and just yanked her out of her boots. So her family goes back, many, many years in the panhandle of Florida, and met her, married her. She was crazy enough to marry me right before grad school, just married me, period. By the way, just by a show of hands, is there anybody from Miami here, or South Florida? What part, man?
I'm from Jacksonville. My whole family's from Fort Lauderdale and North Miami.
Maybe, I don't know if you feel the same way, I miss the cuisine and the beaches of Miami. I just didn't want to go back and raise my family there. Nothing against Miami, I just didn't want to go back. But I miss the beaches, I miss the cuisine that I could find everywhere. Met my wife and we got married, and now I have 4 little kids between the ages of 7 years old and 9 months. So when I'm not here and I'm at home, I'm usually just chasing babies around my house or changing diapers, stuff like that. So I'm just very lucky to be able to come home and see these guys. So then, just to get a little bit more about Chick-fil-A before we talk about how AI comes into intersects with Chick-fil-A. So as I mentioned before, at a restaurant level, we lead the industry in the United States at sales per restaurant. So I want you guys, just for a second, to wrap your mind around it because it's an issue that we have to deal with. we have restaurants that were built to handle X million a year. But you guys are so good to us that you convert them into 2X and 3X restaurants. And we cannot build bigger kitchens. We are not going to. The capital investment is not worth it. So that means we have to make smarter kitchens. That means we have to empower our team members who are working in those restaurants to get more efficient, because we're not going to spend more money on making our restaurants bigger. And with that challenge is one of the tools that we want to equip our restaurants is with how can we leverage machine learning and AI and things like that. So one of the things that I think could come to mind are things like, how do we get predictive about when an appliance, say something we use to cook our food, is close to shutting down, right? So if in a restaurant it's humming at 2x, 3x per year, if one of our critical appliances shuts down, that's very bad, because you don't want to be in that drive-through and you don't want to be in that line any longer than you need to be. And if we tell you, hey, I'm so sorry, our main cooker broke down, you're going to say, that's not my problem, and you're right, it's not. So we have to be able to solve that and tackle that way before it becomes your problem. You know, other things that we have to think about are, how do we continue to stay ahead of, you know, I was at a presentation where a young man stood up, he was from a startup. He stood up and he said, we are here to take on Starbucks. And so what he meant by that is he had literally found a way to develop a concept that would say, probably half the size of this room, where inside of the room, all of the coffee making and all of the breakfast sandwiches were automated. They were made by robots. And so when you think about Starbucks, Starbucks has to employ people, and they can get sick, they can miss work, there's many expenses that come with running a traditional Starbucks or a competitor Starbucks location. Here was a guy saying, I can automate that and cut your expenses by more than half. And so if you're Starbucks, you have to be thinking about, that's a future competitor of mine. It's not just Chic-fil-A, it's not just Dunkin' Donuts, it's a guy that doesn't have to have all that labor because we're going to automate. And they can reduce prices in a way that would put me in danger. So that's not a current 5-10 year issue for Starbucks, but that's coming at them. And so we know that that kind of automation will also impact Chick-fil-A. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of intelligence involved in that. So one of the things that I wanted to, you guys, since you live in Atlanta, I think you have a lot of familiarity with Chick-fil-A. But one of the things that I just wanted to point out as far as how I connected with Chick-fil-A, growing up in Miami, I never saw a Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A was still breaking ground into Miami. And so growing up, I grew up with my grandmother in the house. And I remember her cooking for us, her taking care of us. And I couldn't put this into words, but one of the values that she imparted to me was being a servant, and seeing that as a privilege, not as something that was beneath me. And so she lived that lifestyle. And I didn't realize how much of a value that was for me. So when in my junior year of college, somebody invited me to go try Chick-fil-A, and I walked in, and I had young team members from the ages of, 15, 25, 30 years old, coming up to me, asking if they could refresh my beverage, saying my pleasure. And I kept coming back, I kept thinking, hey, these guys value me being here. And there's almost like a sense of being a servant here. And they don't see that as something beneath them. And so for me, what was the biggest connection is that Chick-fil-A had a value that really spoke to me, that resounded with me. So that was one of the reasons that I applied and am now working at Chick-fil-A. So you guys are very familiar with our products, and I think you guys are perhaps familiar with the fact that at Chick-fil-A, as however is possible, we try to get to know the stories and lives of the customers that dine with, specifically the ones that we see a lot, that we get those opportunities. And so you may or may not have heard of stories where people in the drive-thru may have, they're tired to get replaced, or the ways that we've responded in emergencies. We don't publicize that. We don't pat ourselves on the back. Other folks do that, and that's okay. But the reason for this slide is because we think that one of the differentiators of Chick-fil-A is how hard we try to become integrated into the community. And people can smell when you're doing it just for the dollars. People can tell when you're genuine. And we think that's one of the reasons that we've been able to differentiate ourselves in the industry. So, what do I do at Chick-fil-A? So at Chick-fil-A, I work in a team called New Ventures. And with the New Ventures team, one of the things that I specifically work on inside of the New Ventures team is a process that we call the conduit. So what is a conduit? So we're realizing that there is a growing number of startups coming from the Silicon Valleys of the world, not just in the Bay Area and California. They're developing technology that Chick-fil-A can leverage to help our restaurants that you guys have converted into 2x and 3x and 4x sometimes. And so what we do is that we put our ear very close to the problems and challenges that our restaurants are facing. And so specifically, there are people inside of the home office. We're literally 5 minutes south of the airport, it's where our headquarters is. There are folks that work at the headquarters who are consistently trying to figure out what are the problems that our restaurants are facing, or what are the problems that our supply chain is facing that's getting the product to the restaurant, and how do we solve it? How do we solve it as fast as possible? So traditionally, corporations would say, well, okay, we have an innovation lab, let's figure it out ourselves. And what's happened in the past, I don't know, 10, 15 years, is that corporations have said, well then, how could we possibly partner with startups that are hungry, are agile, they're fast, they've got some really smart people? How do we partner with them and bring in external innovation from the outside internally so that we can move faster? And that's where I sit in our team. So our team says, okay, what are the business challenges? What are the problems that our business has? What are potential startups that are hungry, have the leading, market-leading technology that could potentially come in and provide a solution for Chick-fil-A? So we source and vet this technology based on things that they must fulfill, like they have to integrate with the following Chick-fil-A systems, and we use venture capital criteria. Where are they in funding? Who are their past clients, et cetera, et cetera. And so through this vetting process, we figure out who can come in and who we can partner with. But we don't just bring you in and all of a sudden you get a full contract from Chick-fil-A. We do a bunch of pilots. We want to vet out your technology in the field. So that means we're putting you in the restaurant or we're putting you in supply chain. So what's an example? So let's actually talk about that. So this, by the way, this is our team. We're a team of Scrappy 4, but we don't do it by ourselves. So Megan and Diego, who are here, you guys can raise your hand. We partner with a company called Orange Sparkle Ball, and one of the things that they help us with is to be able to strategically communicate inside of Chick-fil-A. So you can, as you guys know or will continue to discover in a corporation, you can be delivering at a very high level. You can have awesome results. But if you don't have a powerful story, if you don't find a way to tell your story in a very effective way, people won't ever get to listen to your great results because you never brought them along to understand what you've been working on. So both are important. So it's not just heads down, getting my work done. It's also thinking about how do I share my story with people who don't even care about what I'm working on, because that's the way that you start to gain influence in the organization. So when you need things done, like you need people assigned to your team, you need budget dollars assigned to your team. If people don't understand the story of what you're working on, you probably won't get them. So before I come back, I'm going to come back to this slide. I wanted to give you guys a flavor because you guys may be thinking about, well, what do startups do inside of Chick-fil-A? Okay, so we've called out 4 teams inside of Chick-fil-A that we're saying you guys are super important for the future of Chick-fil-A, and you're going to get a disproportionate, you're going to get a lot of budget and people and time, etc., to accomplish your business goals, your business objectives. So one example is restaurant systems capacity. That's a fancy way for saying we gave you a restaurant with equipment to handle X million, and now you're having to handle 2 and 3X. So how do you get smarter about understanding that based on weather, based on events happening, say a football game in the local market, based on the fact that maybe you're a hotspot for tourists, how can you get better about preparing the amount of chicken and waffle fries you're going to need for that day so that you don't run out and you're actually really fast at getting it out to the customer, right? And as I mentioned before, the other example of how do you make sure that you don't let appliances break down before you're ready to fix them, right? So that's a flavor of restaurant systems capacity. Food safety. Does anybody remember some of the scares that Chipotle has gone through in the past few years? So we are very aware of them. And as we continue to grow, that pressure on our restaurants makes the risk of a food safety scare happening go up, right? So that means that we can't just say, well, it's just a matter of business. No, because if we throw our hands up in the air, you guys may not come back and dine with us. So we need to develop technologies or find startups that are working on food safety technologies that can give us a fast way to know, does this chicken have salmonella? Does this breading table where we're preparing the chicken, does it have any bacteria that we can scan really quickly for? Can we admit particles into the air that are not harmful to humans? CDC and FDA, everybody has approved of that, but it destroys pathogens and bacteria in the air, right? Because we are very diligent about cleaning our restaurants, but it's possible that we miss some areas. And could there be something that can be a safety net for Chick-fil-A? And a lot of these, we are a chicken company. We're not developing these technologies on a day in and day out. So we want to partner with the best. And so those are things that are happening in food safety. On-demand platforms. We know that as much as you guys love to dine with us, the future customer and the current customer is saying, Chick-fil-A, I love your food, I think your people are nice, but what if I don't want to come what if I don't want to come to you? What if I'm at work? What if I'm studying for a test? I need you, Chick-fil-A, to come to me whenever I want to order the food and wherever I'm located, on demand, right? So that is the modern world we live in. And so Chick-fil-A understands we must be a modern day company and get our food to where our customers are. And finally, international, I gave the example of, so by the way, before I move on, for on demand, so that means we have to think about who are the companies that are delivering food, right, with a human driver. And what about the future, where it's no longer a human delivering food to you? So those are things that we have to be aware of at the same time. And there are, again, startups that play in the space. And finally, on international, one of the examples that you can have in your mind is when customers are coming to dine with us, they probably won't all speak English. So that means that we have to be thinking about a way of being able to translate or speak with multiple people who may speak different kinds of languages, especially if it's a country where they're used to interacting with kiosks, not necessarily with human-to-human ordering, right? So we have to have a way of being able to account for that. So the slide that I skipped is essentially the process called the conduit that, for those of you who've worked in a corporation before, you may be able to appreciate this. So in a company, when you have a project and you've proven the value of it, you need to go through all the steps to get that project approved at scale, executed across the organization. You need legal agreements to make it happen. Of course, besides the budget dollars, you need people who are going to operationally execute this. You need to have training material. If it's a hardware that's going to be deployed that, for example, is going to allow you to have smart cameras that are going to track the cars in the drive-thru so that you know how to tell the kitchen how much waffle fries and how much chicken they should be cooking at any given time. That's hardware that needs to be deployed, and there's a team that's in charge for that. Well, to get all these different parties moving forward, to get a project launched, that's a lot of people that have to get on board and say, yes, I'm on board, let's do this fast. So in a typical organization, that may take years to happen. But for these teams that I called out before, the company says, you've got everything, we're going to give you everything you need to get it done, but get it done yesterday. And so what we did is, via the conduit, we built partnerships inside of the company to say, hey, when we come to you with a project, and it's typically going to be a startup technology that we're going to deploy across our chain, we need to have a different back door to get this deployed. We need to have a different way to move at a fast pace. And when I say fast, I mean fast in terms of a corporation. And so what the conduit does is that it handles it from beginning to end. We receive the business challenge. So in the first row, you see vetting. We will vet the technology against all the leading technologies in the marketplace. And then when somebody who owns a business problem, say who owns there's somebody inside the company who will raise their hand and say, I'm responsible for predicting when an appliance is going to break down. Okay, we'll find you all the technology that exists, say using machine learning, using artificial intelligence to predict when something's going to break down. Well, once that technology has been identified, then we're going to do pilots. That means we're going to install in, say, 5, 10, 15, 20 restaurants that predictive technology to find out, does it do its job? Can it accurately predict when an appliance is going to break down? And so once we've iterated and we've been able to see that it does work, then the final stage is for that technology now to be commercially enterprise available. That means that all of our 2,000 restaurants can use it. And so that requires a completely different level of agreement and then far more people involved to make that happen. And so we are involved in the entire process to speed that up so that it doesn't take years, so it can be done in a shorter time period. So I think that can be far more I can give you guys a more concrete example with food safety, because this is one area that we don't consider to be a competitive advantage. We actually want all restaurants to be food safe. McDonald's, Chipotle, Panera, not just Chic-fil-A. So one of the things that we partnered on with the organization was that we needed a way to track the temperature of our food from the moment it leaves the supplier, where they're putting the chicken into packages or the waffle fries into packages or the lettuce into packages, right? They're going to go out to the restaurants. We needed a way to track the temperature, because if the temperature of that product, of that food, goes above us, like it gets to 100 degrees, 90 degrees, 80 degrees for a long time, we can no longer serve that product to a customer. It needs to be thrown out. And so one of the things that we need to do is get visibility. How do we know what the temperature of our product is? So we partnered with a company that gave us sensors. They're about smaller than the size of your cell phone, that gets attached to our products, and it follows the food from supplier all the way to the restaurant. And during that time, it's emitting to the cloud what the temperature of our product is. And if any of our products are frozen chicken, or frozen waffle fries, or leafy greens for your salads that must be refrigerated, if they break the threshold of temperature and for a certain amount of time, then that company is responsible for calling in on Chick-fil-A's behalf and saying, hey, you either fix that problem, or you have to throw that product away and you have to reimburse Chick-fil-A. And so that is something, we had a version of that before, but it wasn't as robust. So partnering with a company that is the leading edge, the best in the world at that, we partner with them so that now we have far more safety into the entire journey of our food. From the moment the farm delivers the food to the supplier, and as it travels on trucks to distribution centers, and then to the Chick-fil-A restaurant. There's a lot of areas for that food to suffer temperature abuse. But we need to be able to know where it is so that we can stop it. And so the first step was, we need to know what the temperature is. Check. What is step number 2? Okay, now let's get into predictive analytics. Using machine learning, what parts of the country tend to have, and you guys may already think of it without running any algorithms, what are parts of the country that tend to expose our food to higher temperatures than they should, maybe during the summer, maybe certain parts of the country, right? So that we can then tell these partners, supply chain partners of ours, here are the remediation steps you need to take so that when our food arrives to our restaurants, it's safe. I've given you guys examples of how we thought about increasing the capacity, the ability for our restaurants to deliver more product, more food to our customers at a faster pace while remaining high quality and safe. And on-demand platforms. So right now, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates right now delivers to you. But the future is coming where these vehicles are going to be autonomous, where they're going to be drones in the air delivering food. And so we need to be ready for that day, because it allows flexibility. If there's an apartment complex that's really hard to get to, could drones drop it off at the entrance? Or if all of the drivers are available for delivery, taking up because it's a hot demand period, can autonomous vehicles come in? But you know what? Restaurants today are not set up to handle autonomous vehicles. They're not, because that's not how they built restaurants. So we have to be thinking about not just how do we integrate the technology, but how our real estate will be able to take, hey, you have a human driver coming in with a car, and now you have an autonomous vehicle coming in that's going to take a delivery order. How do you handle that? How do you prevent accidents? So I actually have a question for you guys. It's something that we wrestle with internally inside of Chick-fil-A. Currently, how do you guys feel about ordering food from an autonomous medium? So it can be a drone, or it can be a car. It would show up in front of your house, it would show up in front of your apartment, it would show up in front of your workplace. If that was available, would you want to do it? Would it gross you out? Like, what's going on? I'm just curious.
I actually get a little bit excited about that, only because I have trust issues with like people I don't know delivering my food.
Okay.
Like just to know that like it's literally just this thing that has no personal stake or anything, anything against me as a person, like just something that's just going to drop off the food and leave. That
Okay.
sounds awesome.
Thank you for that. Yes, sir.
Something I found interesting about your question is I have actually worked on drones in the past,
Uh-huh.
where I worked to design a drone that was made for a rescue purpose.
Okay.
So it had to carry heavy equipment.
Okay.
This was nothing too serious, but it was just like theoreticals.
Okay.
And so one thing that I noticed is I saw in a headline once that X percent of drivers for, like, for example, Uber Eats, eat your food. And
Right. You
I
want
was,
to make sure it's okay.
yes, I was really disturbed by that. And because of that, I think that it's a sanitation issue, and that, well, also you're not getting your money's worth. So I think that I would trust autonomous vehicles on this one.
Okay. I think, yes.
Although I do think I would trust autonomous vehicles more so with the handling. I think it's, I gotta be honest, I just think it's one small step. Again, unsewing the social fabric of us as humans.
Mm.
I think at the end of the day, it still takes away someone's job.
Yes.
It still makes this more efficient for the machine. And at some point, on the massive scale, we have to say, we have enough automation right now. We're going to stick to this much human power no matter how far technology moves forward. We're going to make other things more efficient, but it's going to take away from someone. You know what I mean?
That's true.
And I like your all's company, and you're growing, and you're able to employ more people. And I think that you got to be having, I never worked at Chick-fil-A, but you got to have some type of incentive to keep smiles on everybody's face as you do. At one point, I felt like everybody had to have like an associate's degree to work there. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. We're not there yet. Yes.
I think also a problem that's going to come up is like if a person is delivering your food and they accidentally spill all the food all over their car, they are
Yeah.
responsible for it. But
That's
if you've
right.
got a robot of some sort in your drone or a car and something happens, the food gets messed up, sort of who is responsible for that? How does Chick-fil-A kind of handle those situations where somebody gets the drone and they're like, hey, the drone was empty, there wasn't even any food here, like it fell off halfway or something. Like you're going to run into sort of issues with that and just how you deal with that, how you make sure the food stays perfect the entire way when there's not actually a set of human eyes watching the food, making sure everything works out. Because if I go out to the car and my milkshake that I ordered or whatever is spilled all over the autonomous vehicle, I'm going to be mad. I'm not going to want to pay Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is going to be like, well, maybe you just spilled your milkshake. Like, and now you're trying to get a free milkshake. There's just sort of the additional kind of person to kind of help mediate that is gone.
That's right. That's right. Yes, sir.
Well, I would trust more drones than people in certain things. This would be one of the things. But the more concerning part is because drones or automated vehicles don't count on weather changes, weather patterns, wind. So it would be very, very difficult to determine which one would be more efficient. A driver would be more efficient because they'd be able to handle different type of situations, accidents that may happen along the way, traffic jams, the light went down, so there is a light, traffic light that is not working.
Yeah.
The drones, wind changes. For projects like he worked on, there has been many projects that actually failed because, or they cannot send the drone due to wind change, increment of humidity, because that changes on how everything would behave. So In some locations, I would say it's very, very worrisome because there is still places where you have cable lines.
Yeah.
And those cable lines can be an issue. If there is a wind, boom, then you have a power outage.
Yeah.
So those are things that come into play whenever we're talking about technology such as drones for sending automated vehicles. We have to think about all those stuff. I don't think it's going to be a problem with replacing people because there is always going to be a need for a person to check on those stuff, just in case there is an emergency. So basically on that.
Unless the robot checks.
Yeah, and I think those are all real challenges that everybody that pursues this is gonna have to. I think you guys may have seen in the news how many pilots now, and when I say pilot, I mean like a test in the field that Walmart is running with different kinds of autonomous vehicles. And so part of that iterative process is to find out how do you solve for all these issues that are going to happen. How do you account? How do you have contingency plans, right? So what if the autonomous vehicle breaks down on the way to make a delivery? What do you do then? Do you send out a brand new vehicle with brand new stuff? Do you just consider that product to be a loss, et cetera, et cetera? There's so many things that we would have to work through. And through all the examples that I gave you guys, all this automation is obviously being powered by AI, right? So there's going to be there's got to be a way that enables the scaling that allows a company to do these different kinds of solutions in a way that we don't have to have, 100 PhDs always on trying to lead a certain project. We want to be able to partner with technology that would allow not only us to scale, but also ultimately for you, the customer, to receive the price reductions because of the automation. So in every example I gave, AI is a very real part of everything that now that Chick-fil-A does. And it's such a big part that we used to have a team inside of Chick-fil-A called Business Insights, which is where we had a lot of our analysts that would help us understand the future of our business, the current business, running statistical models, et cetera, et cetera. But we've taken we realize how important it is to have the muscle of being able to use artificial intelligence to better understand our business. That we've actually launched a department now called Enterprise Analytics, where we're hiring people who are specialists in computer vision. We're hiring people who know different kinds of machine learning so that those skills can be used across Chick-fil-A in order to help our business be better, faster, stronger. So I think there may be a few more slides, but I'll actually like to terminate here. I think I've given you guys a flavor for what we do, and actually, let me actually say one more thing. So when we are trying to find technology that can be used inside of Chick-fil-A, mainly coming from startups, one of the things that we have to do is coach them, because sometimes startups come in with the mentality of I'm pitching to an investor. That's not true. We're not an investor. We don't even know what Series A, Series B, Series C means. We just want to know how do we use your technology to solve my problem. And so what we become, our new venture team becomes a bridge between the startup world and the corporate Chick-fil-A world. And so we teach the startups how to speak Chick-fil-A, because we have a very Chick-fil-A specific kind of vocabulary, right? And we also tell them, hey, when you come in to pitch to Chick-fil-A, don't just send your salesman. Send your data scientist, send your engineer, send your IT architecture guy, send your cybersecurity person, send your operations person, because you don't know what kind of questions you're going to get from the audience, from the Chick-fil-A audience. And this is your one shot to pitch to Chick-fil-A and possibly get a pilot. So you better have everybody present. Other things that we do is that we make sure that when the startup shows up to present to Chick-fil-A, they have a proposal for what it would look like to partner with Chick-fil-A over 3, 5, 9 months, say at 1, 3, 5 restaurants, or at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 supply chain partners. So that Chick-fil-A knows, okay, if I partner with you, this is how long it's going to take, this is how much it's going to cost. And so it's great that you can explain your technology, but we also need to understand what does it look like for us to partner. So what we do is we bridge that gap to make sure that when a startup presents to a Chick-fil-A business person who owns the problem that we're trying to solve, that business person can walk out of the meeting knowing I know exactly what it's going to take to partner with the startup. So With that being said, I would love to turn it over to you guys for any questions that you may have for me.
Just kind of going back to what you started with and how you guys opened up the Toronto store. Can you give me any kind of feedback on what the perception of it's been because of Toronto being so different?
Yeah, so there's, especially when we enter new markets, there's always differing opinions on Chick-fil-A. And we really we will not get caught up in the different, so the people who view the world differently will sometimes use Chick-fil-A to justify how they view the world, or sometimes use Chick-fil-A to point out what's wrong in the world. And we don't side in either camp. We point out we're a restaurant company that wants to serve everybody's chicken sandwich. And we want all views of the world to come dine with us. And that's the message that we continue to share, regardless of who's lining up outside of the restaurant. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, quickly, did you all provide shirts or any changes to you all's uniform a few years back when the Blue Lives Matter movement was kind of, when tensions were kind of high?
Okay.
Did you all align in any political way with like your uniform and stuff?
No. So Chick-fil-A takes a position that we don't align on either side of the political spectrum. So as I was sharing with him before, we serve everybody's Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and in fact, what we consistently share to the field is that that's exactly what we want to be. We want to be a restaurant that welcomes everybody from all walks of life. And I know that there has been a narrative in certain parts of media that Chick-fil-A tends to favor a certain kind of worldview, and which is, I'm so sorry that that's been shared, but that is not true. We have over 120,000 team members who have all kinds of worldviews and all kinds of lifestyles. And not once in or many decades of being a restaurant business have we ever had a lawsuit from any one of our team members saying that we treated them differently for anything that they believe, or because of how they look, or because of how they live. We have always tried to employ, value, and promote people based on merit, not because of anything else.
I heard an article, and I'm glad you could clear it up and let me know that that wasn't credible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so with the emerging technologies and bringing it and making our lives more efficient, a big thing that comes up is collecting more data. So big data is being collected more about your customers, and also the risk of being hacked and like security reasons there.
Yeah.
So like, how is Chick-fil-A going to incorporate more technology
Yes.
while also keeping the trust of their customers, that you're not going to use our data to like maybe sell us more ads?
Yeah, like be another Facebook. That's right. So, what is your name? Glenn. So Glenn raised a point that keeps our IT department, specifically the head of our cybersecurity team, up at night. So we know that we need to get smarter about the technology that we include in order to empower our restaurants to serve our guests better. But to his point, when you open up a door, or maybe that's a bad way of saying it, when you include new technology, you include a new way for somebody with a malicious intent to get through and be able to hack, to be able to, et cetera. So what has to happen is that while we are keeping tabs on what is the leading technology that can tackle our current day and future business problems, at the same time, we have to keep keeping tabs on what are the latest cybersecurity protocols that we're going to implement to protect our business and protect the data that our guests have entrusted us with. So for those of you who have an app, one of the things that we typically ask you when you first download and do your app is your email, right? We don't want anybody getting your email. And so that means that if we are developing ways to be more personal to you, we want to make sure that any of that personalization technology cannot be leveraged for somebody to get your email and be able to do other things with that information. And to his point about protecting somebody's information, so something that will be true of every single company. So have you guys heard of the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act? It's going to be passed in January of 2020. So it's going to be California's version of the, I always get the acronyms mixed up, with GDPR, yes. So it's Europe's way of protecting your personal information, and California now has a version of it. And so there are very stringent laws that are stringent yet ambiguous. So corporations and companies that see these laws are like, well, okay, I kind of see what you're saying, but you're kind of not being clear. So what we also try to do is make sure that as these regulations are being passed, that we are aligning. In fact, right now, me and my teammates are running fast to make a list of all the technology that we've introduced into the corporation to our legal team. Because our legal team is now responsible for making sure that all of those technology contracts align with California's CCPA, because while all states have not taken on their version of the CCPA, eventually they will have their version, and we need to be ready to protect your information. Yes, sir?
With the defining characteristic of Chick-fil-A being customer service, do you ever get concerned with the continued automation of jobs and job taking over, or automation taking jobs from Chick-fil-A employees, and how that would look in keeping with the image Chick-fil-A has right now?
Yeah, so that's something that keeps our customer experience team up at night. So one of the things that we think is different from our business compared to our other competitors. So I don't know, you guys may not pay a lot of attention to the performance of the restaurant industry, but we have to. And a lot of our competitors, their business is plateauing or going like this. And we are one of the few whose business is doing this. And we think that part of what's allowed that is our focus on customer experience. And so our view, while our competitors may be looking at automation as a way of getting rid of labor so that they can save money and maybe stop the bleeding, we view automation as a way of empowering our talent to be better at serving our customers. So that means, let me give you an example that hasn't happened. I'm just going to think off the top of my head. You guys may or may not have been at a drive-thru at Chick-fil-A that's very busy, and you may see team members out there with iPads taking your order. So that team member has the elements on them, sees a long line and knows that there are customers like, hey, come on, let's go, right? And they're probably tired, they've been out there for a long time, they've got a lot of things going on, and they have to get your order right. So one of the things that is a possibility is, how do we make our talent better with technology? So can you imagine a scenario where a team member comes up to your car, and as you're speaking your order, the iPad is automatically captioning your order and putting it into our system. So what the team member is allowed to focus on is, hey, let's just take the example of a parent that shows up with kids. Does it seem like the parent is having a bad day because their kids are going crazy inside of the car? My kids go crazy inside of the car. So while they can now not have to worry about putting your order in correctly because the technology is doing it, maybe they can say, hey, this vehicle, here's an opportunity that I now have the capacity to view, and I'm going to say, hey, give this car 4 extra cookies, because I had now the mind bandwidth to realize there's an opportunity to serve my customer here. And so we hope to empower our team members, not necessarily remove jobs from the restaurant. Yes, sir.
Well, has Chick-fil-A worked with other companies, other corporations to try to analyze how to reduce the use of plastics or other non-biodegradable, basically, products?
So municipalities across the United States haven't given us the choice. They have said your foam cups are not allowed here, and find another solution. They'll say, I don't know if you're done with us, our main Chick-fil-A sandwich comes in a paper foil bag, and they'll say that mixed material, I can't recycle that. That's not allowed here. And so the Atlanta airport was one of the first airports to tell its restaurants, your stuff must be compostable. If not, don't bring it here. So what Chick-fil-A has to think about is a couple of things. So we adhere immediately to what the needs of the municipalities, so we're going to follow the laws. But what we also are thinking about is, okay, we are fanatics about the experience you have when you come across our packaging. And we don't want to give up that experience because it must also be sustainable. We need it to be sustainable and to give you a great experience. So we have to think about how do we find packaging that insulates, because a lot of compostable packaging doesn't do a good job of keeping your cold food cold and your hot food hot. The temperature just goes away. So how do we find compostable, sustainable packaging that insulates? We're also fanatic about how you interact and see our packaging. So a lot of compostable packaging doesn't allow you to print with high resolution. That's not acceptable to us, even if we have to have option B right now. So option A is insulates and allows us to print with high quality. And finally, we want to make sure, so I don't know how familiar you guys are with our restaurant, but one person gets to run one restaurant. That person, we don't call them franchisee, we call them operators. So every year, 10 to 15,000 people apply to run a restaurant, and we select about 110. And those 110 are given one restaurant. That's it. Doesn't matter if you're a multi-millionaire, hey, let me buy 5 Chick-fil-A's. No, you got to go online and apply, and you might get selected. And so when we give you a restaurant, we understand that that's your one source of income. So we want to make sure that we're doing our best to put as much money back in your wallet. So when you go to compostable packaging, the pricing of packaging goes up, and so that operator begins to lose money. So then we have to then, okay, it insulates, it allows us to write with high resolution, and at scale, once it serves all of our restaurants, can they come close to non-sustainable packaging in terms of pricing? Those are things that intersection of those 3 circles is what we have to constantly be looking for.
Do you imagine that there are developments in legislation as regards to autonomous vehicles? I mean, they're already, because you're, in 46 states?
Mm-hmm.
Said, so a lot of states have already passed legislation regarding autonomous vehicles. And I know there are like levels to their, to the autonomous vehicles. But,
right.
As far as I think it's just bigger than Chick-fil-A, like what we're really talking about, because it's like drones and businesses being able to,
right.
Utilize drones to deliver that. And I mean, people could love it or hate it, but next thing you know, you're walking outside and there are just a bunch of drones everywhere, doing, because you think about, now it's 2019, we all pull out our smartphone and order Uber Eats or order a car to come pick us up. It's a human being doing that.
Yeah.
But, then it's autonomous vehicles, and where do you imagine, legislation and regulating that going?
So I think that the legislators will continue to lean on the leaders in this space, right? So I think the legislators will continue to ask questions to like the folks who are working on these technologies. So Uber and Google, et cetera, or these companies are working on autonomous vehicles, and I'm sure leading startups get if you will, a seat at the table to say, in order to make this work effectively, this is what would be needed, right? And so the government's going to want to do their best to make sure that the technology that will be deployed to the streets or in the air will be as safe as possible, right? And so I think that's going to take a long time, because not only does the legislation have to catch up, the technology also needs to continue to improve. So I don't know if I can say, oh, it's going to be 20 years, but it's going to be 15 years before we will see autonomous vehicles being ubiquitous, drones being ubiquitous. But what we do know is that the companies that are innovating in the space see the opportunity. And so that is going to drive legislation as they continue to push the envelope. Yes?
Is there anyone at Chick-fil-A that wants to keep it open on Sundays?
I'm sure that our operators who only get to one restaurant are like, man, I wish I could get one more day of income, right? Or anybody else. But while there may be a financial incentive, we think have you ever heard of the book called it's a data book. It's called Built to Last by Jim Collins. So in this book, and he did a follow-up called Good to Great. So in this book, he talks about companies that he compares. He'll pick like retail, he'll pick certain industries and compare two companies. And so they were real competitors, and the company that took off, and the company that for a while looked like it was going to take off and didn't, right? And so one of the things that he looked for were what are characteristics that separated companies that were built to last and companies that were a little blip on the screen before they shut down. And we think that the things, we think that being closed one day a week, right now it's Sunday, but being closed one day a week is a value, is a signal to our employees that we think you should have one day off where you know you can bank on it, you can count on it, you can rest, you can hang out with family and friends, and that we are not going to get caught up in squeezing one more penny out of people, one more penny out of that restaurant. We want to be a profitable business, but a business that values its people. So we will continue to put that above being open one more day a week.
So, thank you, Gary. That you've been amazing. And this is not an end, this is a question. I have two, but I'm going to ask my first question first. You're incredibly eloquent and you speak so well and tell such a great story. And, everybody here is sort of in the creative space to some degree, and I know you work with Orange Sparkle Ball.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering if there's any ways, methods, or technologies that you test story and communication. So I'm just very curious about how you do that. I don't know, do you practice this? Do you get feedback? Is there an AI that responds to you? And then how do you all communicate? Because I really love the fact that storytelling within your own organization is also super important in order to get what you need. And that really resonated.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea, being able to have a system that understands the best practices, characteristics when it comes to presenting, and that it could almost be like your own Alexa telling you, hey, your pause was too long, or you're using too many word graffitis, like so, and, which I did a lot. So I think for me personally, when I was in graduate school and I was teaching undergrad statistics courses, I was very obsessed with how do I translate algorithms, how do I translate equations, how do I translate concepts into images, into stories, into things that somebody can walk away and they can forget the algorithm, which is okay, because the computer's going to do it, not you. But you need to know how to be able to get the most out of that algorithm, get the most out of that system. And for you to do that, you have to understand it. And so I've always been very obsessed with how do I tell a story from something that appears to be complex, but it's not, that once you spend enough time with it. I think that's what was a driver. And I think getting the opportunity to constantly get up and make mistakes in front of an audience of different sizes and different locations really helped me. And I think I have a long way to go, and I want to continue to get better at it.
Well, I find it very fascinating that, Chick-fil-A resonated with you because it's customer driven, it's human centered, and so we talk a lot about that in our class, about always focusing on the human, whether it's a story or serving a chicken sandwich. So I think that's a really interesting point. So probably it resonated with you because you were so concerned about the student's experience as opposed to a personal experience. I think that's really interesting concept. Do y'all have anything?
I have, well, obviously we're close, the three of us. But one of the things that really impacted me about both Gary and the whole team. So the team is very cross-functional. So there's a real estate developer, somebody who's a great project manager, a material scientist, and a machine learning expert on this 4-person team. And they dive into insane technical stuff all the time. And it might be around camera visioning, or it might be around autonomous vehicles, and no one can be an expert in all of those areas. But what they've realized is that technology changes so quickly, you actually don't need to be an expert in any of those areas, but you need to be an expert critical thinker, because what they're all really good at, and I think you saw an example of a PhD machine learning guy who is like a fantastic presenter and really can understand where the audience is, what the audience needs to know, and knows the technology enough to translate it on the spot for the audience. That's the key skill, and that is the reason why that group has been so successful. It's not because the material scientist just talks about packaging and packaging components. It's because she can say, this is really interesting. I understand in your business who's going to be interested, and I understand how to translate the story to that person this way and that person this way. And I think that's the differentiating skill. And I think Gary just kind of demonstrated it.
Yeah.
It's super important.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, I feel like you definitely, this resonated with a lot of everybody here, even though a lot of people are like, want to be musicians.
Yeah.
And so, but it's still thinking through what is the end user's experience and what problem are you trying to solve for them.
That's right.
And you know, how can you be agile on your feet and come up with new ideas to give them that new experience.
That's right.
Any other thoughts or questions? Wow, well, let's give him another huge